South by Southwest is one of the first Texas businesses to speak up about the way that this state treats LGBTQ people, and we're very grateful. So why don't you all come out? Come on out and we'll have everyone introduce themselves. So as Hugh said, I'm Jessica Shortall. I run Texas Competes, which is the largest statewide business coalition in the country focused on making the case for LGBTQ rights. We are a program of Equality Texas, and we are grateful to work with the many partners that you'll see. Maybe I can make you see it momentarily. Oh no, hang on, that you'll see on screen in a bit. Okay, oh, thanks. We've got some of those partners represented here today. Before we do introductions, I just want to explain the two empty chairs that we have here on the stage. So as most of you probably know, the state of Texas has started to send agents of the state into the homes of loving families simply because they affirm their transgender children to investigate them for what they are terming child abuse. As a result, there isn't a single parent of a trans child in Texas or a transgender youth themselves that we would feel safe asking to be on this stage today, because by speaking up, they would likely be opening themselves up to the state of Texas knocking on the door of their home. So these chairs, just as we speak, are a visual reminder of the silencing that has been added now to the years of trauma that the state is enacting on transgender people. So with that, would just like to go down the line and have y'all introduce yourselves. We're so grateful to you for being here.
Good morning. My name is Andy Mera. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the executive director of the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund that was founded in 2003.
Hello there. My name is Emmett Schelling. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the executive director for the Transgender Education Network of Texas, or TENT.
Hi, I'm Charlie Apple. I'm a high school senior in Corpus Christi, and I started testifying at the Capitol about a year ago during the regular sessions.
My name is Diamond Stiles. I'm the executive director of Black Trans Women's Inc. and the host of Marsha's Plate podcast.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate you so much. So just to set the stage very briefly, I just want to share a bar chart because I'm fun, and just share a little bit of history and context of why we're here, and then pass over to y'all to talk about this moment. So this is roughly, I probably missed a few, anti-LGBTQ bill filed in state legislatures across the country since 2015. And the colors here are various types of bills. And as you can see, there are some clear patterns that happen over the years, and these are not accidental. So I'm just gonna tell you a little story using data. So in 2015 is when marriage equality was on the horizon. And the folks that are opposed to LGBTQ people in existence and in human rights didn't like that. So the red and orange that you see blowing up there in 2015 and 2016 is attempts to claw back from that marriage win, from people just being able to love each other and start families. So the orange is many, many dozens of attempts to stop people from being able to get marriage licenses. And the red is this wide variety of forms of religiously motivated discrimination. So some big broad bills that would allow pretty much anyone to deny service to anyone for a religious reason. And often back in those days, we think of one of the targets of that as gay couples, a wedding cake, going out to eat together, whatever. But over time, these have morphed and become, I think, even more insidious, specifically saying doctors could refuse healthcare if they cite a religious reason to do so. And more, these target transgender people. In 2015, another thing happened, which was that the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, which gave non-discrimination protections on the basis of race and veteran status and gender and sexual orientation, was overturned by activists who made this simple human rights ordinance into a campaign of fear and misinformation about transgender women and bathrooms. And because they won in Houston, we then had 2 years of fighting bathroom bills in North Carolina, here in Texas, and all over the country. And we mostly won all of these battles. And so you can see that there's sort of a regrouping period in 2018 and 2019. And we know that a lot of national money was poured into message testing and poll testing and figuring out, okay, how can we scare people? I think they thought, well, we got something going here. The bathroom thing almost worked. And so then we've had now for the past 3 years an intense focus on specifically a micro-targeted campaign on children, on transgender children specifically. So that's where we are today. We are still in this moment where the green and blue segments that you see here are attempts to bar transgender youth, especially girls, from playing youth sports with their friends, and to criminalize life-saving, affirming healthcare for trans youth. This year, we also have this brand new thing, this big category of bills that try to erase LGBTQ identities from classrooms, from libraries, from classroom discussion, et cetera. So I just want to point out how many of these are anti-LGBTQ bills, but how many of them specifically are anti-transgender and are devoted to making people afraid just because they might not know someone and understand their life. So I'm done now, and I'm going to pass over to all of y'all and just ask y'all, I'll ask you first, Emmett, what happened last month and what's happening now here in Texas?
Well, I think it's important to back up a little bit more.
Please.
After last year, where we saw a regular session, and then not just one, not just two, but 3 subsequent special sessions, where our legislative body largely didn't want to pass any kind of medical care ban, anything that was around what we're dealing with currently today. And so AG Paxton had issued an opinion based on a request from Representative Matt Krause that was placed earlier or at the latter end of last year. And essentially our governor took that and based on an opinion that didn't have any actual basis of evidence or facts or any of the places where we look to have clarification and guidance from medical experts within these professional organizations, and instead issued a memo directive to DFPS, or Department of Family Protective Services here in Texas, that essentially gave orders to investigate gender-affirming healthcare for minors as child abuse, is sought to criminalize parents, sought to criminalize physicians, and it made mandatory reporters to simply report on our neighbors, who may have transgender children, and created yet another directive, making Texas seem like this vigilante state at this point. So, as a result of that, understandably, we have families literally living in hiding, living in fear in this state. And, the chairs here, I think, are a chilling, tangible reminder that the state has essentially forced parents who advocate for their children. And as parents, no matter what, that's our job, to advocate for our kids. And so when you force somebody into hiding, when you force them underground, what happens?
Can you talk a little bit, Emmett, if you're willing, about what happened at the DFPS meeting on Friday?
Yeah. They had a hearing. It was about strategic planning, and being who we are, we said, "Oh, we have some input about your strategy," and so for context, we looked into the records. I think our colleague Audrey, actually from ACLU, and was like, the most they've had is 6 people come testify, and we had around 70, right? And this was every single person. There was not one person that showed up to say, this is a great thing. Let's go with it. Instead, what we did see were people that didn't show up for us, that showed up to give comment, that heard what was happening and said, this is fundamentally wrong. This is wrong. You should know it. I know it. Anybody who's listening to this knows it. And so, really important, because we did see that the accountability really be front and center, and they had to sit in that like discomfort. They had to hear stories, and because our families, unfortunately, aren't safe to come share themselves and their stories and what they've been going through, we asked families and trans kids to write letters about what this had been. And then we coordinated with volunteers to read those statements. And it was powerful, because when somebody is faced, I think, with the cruelty and what the situation and the nightmare that this has been, it's a hard thing to turn away from.
As a cisgender person who is trying to help, I think it's the most powerful way I've seen cisgender people show up and stand there, people breaking down in tears, not about their own children, but about their neighbor, their friend, and delivering those stories. Andy, can I ask you to give us a little bit of, I don't know if the clarity is possible, about where we are now, what happens next?
So I also want to rewind a little bit and just probably state the obvious to the audience. What has happened here in Texas, it's not rooted in any legal, medical, or scientific basis, just full stop. And the law hasn't changed. No court in the state of Texas has found that gender-affirming care is considered a form of child abuse. And, you know,
Take your time.
families are scared. And right now it's very confusing. Our friends at the ACLU and Land Illegal have filed litigation. The court upheld the ruling and issued an injunction. Of course, Attorney General Paxton has filed an appeal. And families are scared. So, what I think is a shining light in this moment is that we have seen a presidential administration mobilize, listen to the folks on the ground, and take action. And so I think it's really important to remember a few things. Number one, the law actually says quite the opposite with regards to access to gender-affirming care for young people. One, it's protected under the Affordable Care Act, specifically Section 1557, and that is a legalese way of saying it is a non-discrimination provision that includes trans people as being protected in accessing the care that they deserve, that is medically necessary and life-saving. The administration also recently issued guidance as well. Emmett and I were both on that call with the White House at like 8:45 at night. And making it abundantly clear that to deny care could be unlawful under federal law, and also to reveal an individual's, a patient's information to an agency in that manner is actually unlawful. It's under HIPAA. It's patient's privacy and their rights to privacy. So the administration has made it very clear to states like Texas that this is a witch hunt, it is unlawful, and it's wrong. It's all politically motivated. And I think many of us are confused. You look at the Attorney General, and very well documented, he's broken bread with trans families. He had dinner with a family with a trans child and remarked, "Isn't it nice to have kids at this age? Isn't it wonderful?" And to see this is not just government overreach, it's a violation of trust, I think, that many families in Texas have in the state government.
You know, I think it might have been this room. I stood in 2017 and gave a talk at the beginning-ish of the bathroom bill fight in Texas. And you mentioned privacy. I just want to note that we spent all of 2017 being told that we needed a bathroom bill because children's privacy was so important. And here we are with a most deep invasion of the privacy of families. And we've been told quite a few times in the past several months by the same leaders that parental rights are sacred. And here we are. I just want to mention briefly that this is happening in other states as well. So I know we have a global audience for South by. There is a felony healthcare ban moving in Alabama aimed at affirming care for transgender kids. Felony, so jail time for healthcare providers. And I don't know the status. There is or was one moving in Idaho. It may still be moving. And we will see this again. We'll see these bills filed in Texas next year. We'll see them filed all over the country. So this is not a Texas-specific problem, and we'll talk about ways to engage elsewhere too. Diamond and Charlie, would you talk a little bit about, if you're willing, the impact of this latest campaign on your families or the families you know?
Well, I know my family, we just feel powerless because we're just some small, we live in the South. We don't have any power. These government officials are supposed to protect our rights. But now they're talking about how my existence is child abuse and I need to be removed from my family and put in the foster care system, that my parents are child abusers who've done nothing but love and support me through my transition. It just creates this environment of fear. I know when I go to school, I'm still in high school, and I worry about the day that one of my teachers or an AP might report me and my family to DFPS. I don't trust anyone around me, and that's a horrible situation to live through when you're trying to make it through senior year. I gotta worry about college. I shouldn't be worrying about this. And it's one of those situations where I feel like I can't do anything because I am at the mercy of powerful people who don't want to understand me, who don't want to take care of me. They want to put a political agenda on my body, on who I am as a person. And that creates an environment of fear and suspicion, and people are trying to look for kids like me. I'm gonna be real honest. It's pretty obvious I'm trans. I'm pretty open about it. And I worry about the day that someone weaponizes that against me. But
during the organizing of this panel, we were on Zoom, and Charlie was at a theater, a drama evening. I want you to think about that. I transitioned at 13 in the 90s. And in that moment, I really wanted so strongly to just be doing high school kid stuff, and I'm so sorry that you have to deal with this in this time. I thought that stuff that I went through and grounds that I had made and other people who transitioned in the 90s, 2000 and so we had laid a path for y'all to be a little bit more free. But here we are, and you have to deal with this. And I am so sorry about that. And I know it's not my fault, but I want you to know that you have people that are out here that's supporting you, and we want you to have that fun, amazing high school time, and you should not be dealing with this crazy adult foolishness. What I have seen is data around an uptick in how trans people are thinking about suicidal ideation. They are thinking about not going to school at all. They are having panic attacks. This is affecting their mental health. This is affecting their social needs. This is affecting every part of their life when they are actually, because they have supportive parents, it actually sets them up for the most success, just like everybody else. That's just not specific to trans people. When you have supportive parents, could you think that it sets you up for, success? Like we have some of our biggest celebrities, because they had supportive parents, they are a success that they are. So Trevor Project put out some data saying that they take the calls of trans people who are scared, who may not have outside of their parents somebody to talk to. Their calls have went up like 52%. And so we are seeing how this is affecting people's lives on the ground. And I feel like that's the most egregious part, because, I'm an adult. I have set up support system. I'm 40, and so, support system, and I've worked hard to get to this level of care in my community in that regard. I can only imagine if you're young, dealing with your emotions, dealing with bullies, dealing with all the things that just naturally are, I won't say naturally, but are gonna come with being a high schooler. And now, not only am I dealing with this stuff, when you're in high school, you're like, oh, it feels like it's right there, like this is the life. But then as you're an adult, you be like, oh, we don't even talk to those people anymore. It was so big. But to imagine that not only is this crazy stuff happening in high school, but literally politicians, the big adults, are actually speaking on my life in a wrong way, to actually be living that. And what that does to your mental health, what that does to your family, as families thinking about moving to other states that they can't afford, just to have protections. And so, yeah.
And I can kind of speak on a smaller scale to those big old statistics. I run my school's GSA, and for a lot of these kids, I'm the oldest trans person they've ever met. It wasn't until I went up to the Capitol that I learned that there were trans adults who I could look up to and had made it. They were lawyers. Oh my goodness, trans people can be lawyers? Why didn't anyone tell me about that before? But for them, I'm one of the oldest trans people they've ever seen. And they look up to me, and they're suffering. They live in deep South Texas, Corpus Christi. That's about as far south as you could go before you hit water. And they don't have supportive families. They don't have good support systems. Oftentimes that GSA is the only place they can go and be themselves. We don't have the resources that many other kids up in other places get. That GSA is one of the first that's lasted longer than a year in my city. And I know my school is changing. The kids are changing, they're getting better, but there are still those adults who have power over us. We're kids, we can't fight our teachers, they just misgender us. And I know that whenever I experience bullying or harassment, because I do, I can't go to them for help. They're just gonna leave it. Trans issues for them are too complicated to try and deal with. And it's terrifying, but trans kids don't really disappear into air whenever you decide, we don't think those kids should exist. We're still around, we've been around for quite a while.
Quite a while.
And it's terrifying, but these kids are so scared. They don't know what their future is gonna be like. And they don't have anyone to tell them it's okay other than some 18-year-old who walked in.
I just want to say too, Diamond, to your point about the statistics that Trevor Project shares, is that they know this. I know they know it because we have been telling them since 2017, since the bathroom crusade. We have been showing them that literally you pass a bill out of committee, spike in calls. You hold a press conference and say hideous things, spike in calls. They know it. And that's one of the hardest parts for me, is to then see them know that and continue to try to hound y'all out of existence. It's very hard to watch. I just want to pause briefly. I do not want to ask you all to spend your time up here trying to debunk the lies and misinformation, because I think we deserve to hear about your joy and your fight and your lives. But I think if we could just very briefly, and also my timing sheet here is blown to hell, which is fine. But talk about a little bit about what affirming care means for transgender youth. Could we start, Andy, could we start with you? Actually, before we do that, I'm sorry, gather yourself, sorry. One of y'all, would you talk about what it looks like to affirm a younger child with what's called a social transition?
You see them.
So what it looks like, it's not really rooted in medical. There's some medical elements, but it's rooted in socializing, and how can we affirm you by using your affirmed name, by using letting you grow your hair out if you wanted to grow long, or letting you cut your hair if you wanted to be short. It is allowing you to socially transition to your affirmed gender with the support of your family. All affirming care is a coalition of people working together. Your physician, your doctor, your parents, and the child. It's highly, highly individualized. As trans people are not a monolith. We are very different. We live in different places. We have different needs, and it's so individualized for the care is specific for that individual. And so it's gonna look like so many different things, and the main gist is having a core support system like your family saying, this is okay. If you need somebody to talk to, if I need to go up to the school and talk to your parents, if I need to go up to the school and talk to whoever, your gym teacher, your counselor, and let them know this is how my child needs to be addressed, you have somebody, your parent, which is duh, to say, so you don't have to do that kind of fight. You have somebody who actually can stand in for you, and they have the whole medical association supporting them and saying that this is how you take care of a trans child. It is not the politicians, it is actually the medical field saying your family is right. Mm-hmm. And it's just the socializing that we have to, that it focuses on, and that it take care of your physical needs, your mental needs, and your social needs. That's what affirming care is about.
I think long and short to summarize what Diamond is essentially is allowing your child to share their truth about who they are, and you recognizing and supporting that. And, as Diamond said, there's criteria. It's not like it's just one and done, come up and like, hey, I think I'm trans. Parents are like, oh yeah, okay, let's. No, it's understanding that when your child is insistent, consistent, and persistent, that they are deeply unhappy in the body that they are in. And when that deep unhappiness starts to shift to something darker, to thoughts of not wanting to be in their body because they don't want their body to be in this earth anymore, in this world, then yes, parents are going to say, wait a second, I want to hear, because clearly this is affecting you so much. It's bringing a dark cloud around the child that we have always known. And parents will say, and I felt like my kid was disappearing. And when I finally got to a place where I could accept what they were saying, because that's what it's about. These kids are accepting themselves. We are accepting who we are. We need people to understand that, and also the people that love us to say, I accept you too, and I want to do everything I can. And that's simply what parents are doing. I'm going to let you be in this world as who you are. And that's a gift every single parent should be giving their kid, trans or cis.
Well, they said it. So what I will say to underscore is that gender affirming care it's highly specialized form of medicine. It's highly individualized, as Diamond said. And what I think is so remarkable as an older trans person now, wow.
I didn't say it, you did.
Is that we have more and more young people coming out at such an early age and feeling validated and supported and are growing up in families that recognize who they are. And look, beyond talking about the medical and scientific and legal stuff, what I think is really important for activists like myself and Emmett and Diamond and others is that folks like Charlie represent the future that we could not have. And I think for many of us that have been engaged in this work, intensive work for the past several weeks, and last year as well with legislative session here in Texas, that is something that is worth protecting and fighting for.
Yeah.
And we know that, the fact of the matter is when trans young people grow up in families that affirm them, that see them as who they are, it enables them to thrive. It enables really powerful and amazing developmental outcomes. When a young person is able to be seen as who they are, the weight of the world falls off their shoulders. And they can focus on other things, like getting an A+ on their history exam, being able to hang out with their friends and do the kinds of things that young people do. When I was a sassy kid, so I mean, you can all imagine what we all did when we were in high school and middle school and so on. But it allows young people to thrive, and to see that threatened and put under risk is taking away someone's right. And that's what this is about. Governor Abbott and the Attorney General want you to believe that somehow trans young people and their families are taking away something something away from you. And the reality is, no one's taking anything away from anybody. This is about increasing access for more people. And the last thing I'll add is, because of the fact that our young people do see medical providers, and every medical association in this country has confirmed and affirmed and underscored that gender-affirming care is medically necessary. And it's frustrating that we have to say this.
If you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
When I came out, I was 13 years old. I think the same age as you. And I really want y'all to understand, we are kids. I was a tiny little 13-year-old, and I couldn't see a future that had me in it. I was a kid, and I thought that I was just gonna disappear from existence. Until I discovered this word, I could be trans. That is a future I could live, but I didn't know what it looked like. I, for so long, had to fight my own battles with teachers, with parents, with not my parents. They were pretty understanding, but I did have to do some of my own, I had to teach my parents, my families, what this meant, because they were scared too. When a kid comes out as trans, if you think of all of the news you hear about trans people, it's deaths, it's murders, it's these anti-trans bills. What kind of future does that give parents for that child? I had to decide and kind of map out what my own future would look like, what my adulthood would look like. And I'm one of the lucky ones. I survived. I have lucky parents. I have really accepting parents. And there are so many kids who don't make it as far as I did. And that's a travesty. I am 18, and like I said, for a lot of those GSA kids, I'm the oldest trans person they've ever met. what if your oldest, like, someone like you, someone who lived the same path as you, the oldest person you ever met was 18 years old? What does that say about your future? Because I'm still a kid, I haven't lived that long. As a trans kid, you have to fight your own fights. You have to make and tell other adults who you are. And gender affirming care just gives us a future. It gave me a future that I didn't think I would get. And now I think, like, despite all of this, I feel like I'm doing pretty well. I'm still fighting the same fight I have my whole life. These legislators, to me, are no different than the high school bullies I've dealt with all my life. And they use the same rhetoric. They talk to me the same way. They don't scare me. And eventually, they're gonna go away. And
Charlie, if my kids turn out like you, I will be so proud.
And, you know, I'm still a kid, but I'm hoping that I can tell people about my experiences so one day other trans kids don't have to. And I think that's the generational thing we all want. And I'm sorry it's not over yet, but it will be someday, I hope.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful. Thank you, parents.
Thank you.
Thank you, because my parents weren't necessarily supportive, but they weren't, you know, bad either. They just was kind of nonchalant about it. But to have somebody, you know, in your corner, that would have just changed my whole trajectory of my life. It would have changed the whole landscape of what I saw as the future. And so I appreciate you saying that, because that's important. That's really, really important. And this is this is not a historical. Historically, in this country, when we are trying to disenfranchise people, we use tactics in regards like fear. We use propaganda. We use things that are false pseudoscience. We use tons of, this is kind of the norm in this country. You know, it goes back to the beginning. We can go further back. For me, I think that weaponizing people's discomfort and ignorance actually is something that we have to really, really pay attention to when we're hearing the news about what's going on. When we are hearing, you know, extreme cases that are not true, actually make sure that as a reporter, you're actually telling the true story. Make sure if you're a journalist, if you're a reporter, if you're actually doing the work around educating people, make sure it is the full story and it's not rooted in fear. And make sure we're not spending time in the weeds of silly things that some of these people who don't even have trans friends. That's another thing. They don't even know trans people. There's some legislators here in Texas who have said, we don't even have trans friends. And you're trying to tell us about our care, trying to tell us about, you know, all these things that are just not true. And so we have to make sure that we are not, as people, not susceptible to those kind of fears. Because, you know, when we think about the history, like those anti-homosexual commercials in the 60s, when we think about Anita Bryant in the 70s, who was like, oh, save our children, before she got the pie in her face.
Same language.
Same exact language. When we think about the AIDS crisis and, oh, this is a gay disease, and, you know, and then we come to find out that no, it's not, it's everybody can get it. And so, you know, these are the type of tactics that people use, and we want to make sure that, you know, I know these past 4 years have been full of fake alternative facts and stuff like that, but we have come into a new era, and we want to make sure that our information and our emotionality is rooted in facts and education, and don't let the people fear you into, you know, some silly rhetoric and listening to their silly rhetoric and thinking that children are being harmed. This is not abuse, as Andy said.
That's so important. And I think it is a very clear playbook to say a lot of people don't know someone who's trans. They may have feelings of discomfort because they don't understand that, and because we have this lot of thinking about other people's bodies for reasons I don't understand. And so if you find somebody who is uncomfortable, if you try, you can get that person from discomfort to fear. And fear is the, twin of anger. And then that can be weaponized, and I think that's what we're seeing. And we had this conversation when we were preparing. Emmett, you said something about discomfort and asking folks to sit in discomfort. I wondered if you could talk to that.
I mean, the reality of what we see here, I think, not just trans folks, but the LGBTQ community in general, fear has always been weaponized against us to ignore when there's violence happening, to ignore when, the HIV epidemic was just ripping across the community. And now, we saw fear with trans people, fear with me using a bathroom. And now, we're seeing this fear being weaponized against kids. And in that evolution, how sick. And I think where I'm at is this overall frustration is for folks that don't understand, sit in your discomfort, because people's discomfort is killing our people. And your discomfort is not worth Charlie's life, is not worth Diamond's life, not worth Andy's life, not worth my life, not worth one of our lives. Your discomfort does not mean enough for us to lose our health care, for us to lose our lives, for these kids to lose their parents, for these parents to lose their homes, their livelihoods. What does that look like, really? I don't care that you don't know a trans person. I'm gonna say that today, and maybe that's not a good look for my job, but I just don't care. Because you probably have. And just because I'm not hugging you or handing you a sticker that says, hooray, I met a trans person today, look at me. It does not mean you don't know us. It doesn't mean that we're not interacting, with you in your life in some way. And just because we're not letting you know explicitly that we are trans, we don't owe that either. So when people say, I don't know a trans person, it's like me looking at my friend, in this room and being I don't know a diabetic. Well, I don't know a diabetic, but I'm also not rude enough to be hey, let's talk about your medical information. Why not? Just want to get to know my friends, and that's the reality of it, is that this country needs to sit in its discomfort and figure out what that means, that they are more willing to try to avoid discomfort and turn a blind eye while we are literally turning the state into a vigilante sort of justice. Mm-hmm. And eventually, if people do not stand up beside us, if people do not start pushing back, if people do not start saying this is wrong, and they succeed, that is not where they will stop. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the reality of what we are at, because everyone's oh, I can't believe, this isn't well, yeah, but it's still happening. It's still affecting people. So I really just need people to sit in their discomfort so these kids don't die.
I think I'm an optimist. I am an optimist, and
that's cute.
I am, because I believe we're right, and we're on the right side of history.
I believe we're right too.
The fact of the matter is, there's a lot of people that don't know a trans person. It's getting better, and more young people are coming out, and there are studies that show that more Americans in this country know a trans person. Mm-hmm. There's also been studies that have shown that 2/3 of Americans in this country support non-discrimination protections that explicitly include trans folks. And that's a big deal. What I think is important with not just what's happening here in Texas, but in places like Alabama, Idaho, South Dakota, Iowa, these are efforts that are being coordinated by a very small fringe right group of organizations that are attempting to derail progress, right? If you look, and also we're talking about big money here, big dark money. You look at the top 5 anti-LGBTQ organizations in this country, the Heritage Foundation, Alliance Defending Freedom. If you add up all of their annual budgets, it's roughly $250 million. It's a lot of money. And if you look at organizations like ours that are on the front lines, defending and protecting and seeking to advance protections for our community, we're pennies. Not even pennies. I don't even know it's a denomination below a penny on the dollar. And the fact of the matter is, we are being used like political footballs. It's happening here in Texas. I think a lot of Texans are probably confused about what's going on here in the state. They don't understand the implications. They don't understand where this came from. And quite frankly, I'll say it. Primary, re-election, midterms. People have political aspirations, and they've realized that using the trans talking point is somehow the winning ticket. And quite frankly, I think as more reporting continues to come out and more investigations continue to occur on this particular subject, we are going to see, in my mind, and this is where I am the optimist, they've overplayed their hand. They've overplayed their hand. And I think that for many of us who are not politicians or elected officials, it's not that hard to make the distinction. Using young people as a political weapon, not a good idea. And I think that while parents right now with trans young people and their families are fearful and are confused, the fact of the matter is, I think we're going to see more and more families get activated and stand up and do something.
And I hope that means families like mine that don't include a transgender person, right? It's very important for families like mine to be involved.
Absolutely. I think anyone who's a parent can recognize, don't mess with our kids. It's none of your business. And I think that's the hypocrisy here, right? People are using terms like parental choice or the right of parents. And what I find fascinating is that these are Republican talking points, right? And even the Republican Party isn't unified on this matter. Conservatives actually are not united on this front. We saw last year, nearly 150 anti-trans state bills pop up in legislatures across the country. And in some of the hottest states where we thought there was a real risk of some of these bills coming into law, we saw Republican governors stand up and say, this is not in our best interests. This is not my legacy. This is not good for my state. We saw it in Utah, we saw it in Louisiana, and we saw it in Arkansas, despite the fact that their legislator vetoed or overturned the governor's veto. And even this week, there was Steve Bannon was on his radio show.
What a class act.
Right? and look, I'm sure a lot of people have thoughts and feelings about Steve Bannon, but even he said, and I quote, "You talk about parental rights, you talk about freedom, but as soon as they do something you don't like, right, all of a sudden, you're trying to clamp down on freedom, you're trying to take away parental rights." So
I don't like how you got me agreeing with Steve.
but the point is, this is not cut and dried, as I think some political consultants and a select number of elected officials and a cabal of organizations would want you to believe.
That's right. They've gone so far around the bend, they've run smack into their own stated principles.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we had the Parents' Bill of Rights here in Texas during the campaign. And
It says healthcare.
yeah,
Parents should make decisions.
Sure
for their
did.
children's healthcare. We don't have a ton of time left, and I mean, I should do one of those dramatic things where I crumple up the paper and throw it, and that's wonderful. Hugh said we can go over a little, so we'll be being told a little. Okay, I do want to say, we want to, people want to know what they can do, and so we'll get to that as well. I'll put it up, but I want to talk a little bit about, we talked about race and class, and the intersections with what's happening here, and so I wondered if y'all would speak on that a bit.
I know I'm the token black girl, but you can go ahead, Emmett.
how you can do me like that here?
You're Asian, go ahead.
So I think one of the things, right, for folks that aren't super aware about the trans community but have some awareness is one of the things that always hits is violence around who specifically suffers the most violence within our communities. And Texas, unfortunately, leads this nation for, I think, 6-7 years running now for the most murders of transgender people, and specifically Black trans women and trans women of color. And what I think is really important for folks to also understand in this, the same time we have families, struggling to do everything they can, we also know that socioeconomics play a large part in this. So we also know there's kids in this CPS system that are trans, and they're in that system because they were thrown out of their homes. And we also know in childhood removals, when it comes to CPS, what families, in terms of demographics, are targeted the most for those child removals? What does that look like? And then looking, at the full scope of this to really, hopefully leave people with as robust of a picture as you can kind of imagine. But understanding that race is one compartment of it, but the attachments on that. For me, I try to really bring in that I am a first generation immigrant because I was adopted from a foreign country, just like Andy. And so also understanding that gave me a lot of class privilege. That gave me a lot of access to things that would not have necessarily been a reality for me, but also knowing that I'm not gonna be white in this world ever. I think COVID, if anything, was this very big reminder of how different the world that I live in looks at me as foreign, as alien, as quick, when there's that fear, to quickly be able to point out, you're not one of us, you are a danger, all of this. And so understanding, right, they didn't look at me and say, you're a transgender menace. They looked at me and said, you're Asian, and now I feel unsafe. And so understanding that when you put those components together, when you have trans people that often are at a much higher rate of disparity when you're talking about Black trans folks and trans people of color, then what does that look like when we talk about this whole conversation too? And I'm sure Diamond has better things out there.
And I think we have to understand that also, like you said, there's going to be a difference in privilege when we talk about protection against these type of attacks. For example, when I transitioned at 13, my mom wasn't too thrilled about it, so she didn't, kick me out or anything like that, but she didn't really get on the train till I was probably 17. So I went 3 years without any support, kind of navigating. But at 17, she still was poor. She still didn't have insurance for us. So all the things that could, like say if something happened, because I actually had to sue my high school, and I won. Sue my high school to go to the prom in a gown. And so when it was time, when that support was needed, I actually, which was the whole time, but when it really hit the fan, she didn't have money for resources for lawyers. She didn't have money or anything to kind of shield us from some of the attacks from people. When we think about, I read an article that the parents was like, oh my God, and this is not to demonize them, but they were like, oh my God, we gotta move out of Texas. And I'm like, my mama couldn't have moved out of Texas and she shouldn't have to. First of all, she shouldn't have to move. If this is our proud state, we are all proud Texans, right? And so, in that regard, she shouldn't have to think like that. But it is a privilege to think that you can just move to California. We know how expensive California is. It is a privilege to be able to do that. It is a privilege to have somebody, to hire lawyers and say, we want to protect ourselves from the harm that can kind of come. The people who are going to be most affected is going to be poor people, minority people, and they don't have the social safety nets that comes with being middle class or being white or being, anything that privileges people in this country. And so it can make them more susceptible, like any other situation that we've been talking about for decades, more susceptible to harms, unfair harms, and have the worst kind of consequences.
I'm getting all kinds of red flags here that we have to wrap up. I apologize. Can we take some questions? Or we don't have time? No. Okay. I want to put this up on the screen, which y'all can see. I know we have Texas, national, and global audience. That QR code will take you to a place that you can then enter, tell it where you live in the United States, and it will connect you to your state equality organization. The Texas, you can text and be connected to make a call to the governor here in Texas. That top website is all of our coalition organizations, one-stop shop for this moment, legal updates, status updates, ways to get help, ways to give help, and then a couple of international organizations doing this work around the world. I also just want to say that I'd ask y'all to go and seek out joy and talent and creativity that trans people put into the world and pay for it and see that joy and not just this trauma that is being put on trans people, because there's so much out there, and South by has given platform to so many trans creators and entrepreneurs, and that joy, which we've seen even moments of it here, of y'all joking with each other and laughing, and I just, your joy is infectious, and I want people to see it and pay for it. Do y'all have any closing, anything you'd like to say that we really didn't get to? I know you're gonna kill me for that, but I can't help it.
Kind of closing?
No.
I guess we could talk about where they can find us.
Sure.
You can find me, Diamond Styles, DIAMONDSTYLZ, across all social media. I have a podcast. I'm an EDO organization. Yeah, if you need information or that joy, I'm focused on joy.
I suppose you can find me on Instagram at Apples Orchard. I don't really post much, but I am up there. I may be 18, but I don't know how to use social media, so.
Well, I don't either, so. You can find Tent at Trans Texas, also this txtranskids.org. If you reach out, you'll be able to connect with us. And Trans Texas is literally across all of our social media platforms.
You can also find the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund as well at that link to txtranskids.org, as well as by visiting our website at transgenderlegal.org.
Thanks, y'all. It's an honor to be up here.